of the gift of the altar that sanctifieth the gift. Whoso therefore shall swear by the altar sweareth by it, and by all things thereon. And whoso shall swear by the temple sweareth by it, and by him that dwelleth therein. And he that shall swear by heaven sweareth by the throne of God, and by him that sits thereon. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you tithe of mint.
Hello, good morning. I have a little rough start today, so we're streaming a bit late. But we're continuing in Luke chapter 11, verse 53. He's completed saying these things to the Pharisees, accusing them of things. As the lawyer said, what do you say? Thou reproachest us also. He's reproaching them. He's saying that they're doing things, pointing out things that are wrong with what they're doing. And on some level, humans know this is wrong. We know that, like, someone who's honest with themselves know that they're again, some major sounds in here. All right, well, it's not on the thing, so that's good. But it's like, oh, maybe that was my mic. Anyways, so that's better. So anyways, people know their inner world is corrupt. We don't generally admit it. And that's why there's a lot of things that go on in people's minds, sinful thoughts, sinful desires, sinful urges that people bottle up. And sometimes, there's more to it than that. It's like, they do things that they think nobody sees, but God sees. And it's sort of a betrayal of, the show of righteousness, that we all kind of put on. And like I said, that's like, the Pharisees said, one of the things they said is, if we had been in the days of our fathers, we would not have been partakers with them in the blood of the prophets. Jesus said, you fill up the measure of your fathers. You build the sepulchre of the prophets, and your fathers killed them. You allow the deeds of your father. You bear witness. Because you are essentially the same as them, even if you haven't killed anyone yet. I think that may be the thing, because here's the thing. It's so easy as a Christian to sit back and say, I wouldn't be like those Pharisees. No, not me. I'm not like those Pharisees, those hypocrites. When, you're essentially the same. In fact, all humans are essentially the same. And we vary to a great degree, but also to a large degree, we're very much the same. I mean, it doesn't take a lot of difference. Very small differences can cause, in makeup, let's say, can cause great differences in effect. Like people with very minor differences, it's a very, like they say that humans and chimps share 97% of their DNA, which is actually not as amazing as they make it sound, because, like, if you look at the English language, for example, like sentence structure is pretty much, there's a syntax and sentence structure. And you say, well, everything's kind of the same, But, like, it makes a big difference when you say, like, there was a version of the Bible that was printed with, thou shalt commit adultery, and they left out the not. It just got missed in the printing. And they call it the Devil's Bible because it says, thou shalt commit adultery. And it's like that. It's like the one word changes everything. So 3% of differences makes a lot of difference. I mean, look at a monkey. It goes like, oh, the information that created is 97% similar. Well, the devil's in the details, isn't it? That goes to show. It's funny the way people are like, wow, they're almost exactly the same as us. Look at them. Do they seem almost exactly the same as us? And think about how individually the same we are as humans, yet how vastly different we are. You know what I mean? People can be personality-wise, they can be total opposites. And what do they share? 100% of the same DNA? Well, not exactly, do they? Not exactly. Oh, there's differences, and the devil's in the details. There's all these kinds of differences between people. But we're mostly the same. And we are just as capable of being like the Pharisees as the Pharisees. Put in the right circumstance, but for the grace of God. And that's the important thing, is that you recognize what you're capable of. Don't be part of what being a hypocrite is thinking you're better. Yeah, I mean, some people, I know some Christians who tend to run themselves down too much, thinking they're always like the worst possible persons, like when they're usually some of the best people. But they can't allow them to think that, and that's part of the path to ultimate, fulfillment in Christ, is sort of to take a very humble view of yourself. And so it's no surprise that some people who are very who have become more like Christ maybe than many people come into the stumbling block of being too hard on themselves. Harder on themselves than they even deserve. And that's, I don't know if there's any real way around it in a sense, because it's like, it's never a question of what we deserve, it's what we want. You know what I mean? If I want, like, I may not, like, when you start getting the question of, like, what does someone deserve? Well, it's like, well, do they deserve, like, if you work out, you may experience pain. Do you deserve the pain? You know what I mean? From the muscle soreness you might get from doing a lot of exercise? No, but if you want to get stronger, sometimes you're going to be sore and aching. It's the price you pay, you know what I mean, for striving for something so high. So in a sense of like the humility and the difficulty of achieving the greatest things often puts us in situations where we feel like we're not equal to the task. But that's why we have brethren to encourage us, because such people shouldn't be allowed, we can't allow ourselves to become too negative either. Anyways, I just want to mention that because of the sense of, like, it's so important. Like, it's so easy to read that and say, wow, what a bunch of wicked people they are. And I know people like them. Oh, yes, I do. I know people who are like the Pharisees. And the Pharisees are so wicked, and those people are so wicked. And I'm so much better. It boggles the mind. That's not... I want to make sure we understand that's not how we should respond to this. But it is indeed how often people do respond. Those wicked people. They'll read the story of Sodom and Gomorrah and say, like, Sodom and Gomorrah, so wicked. And people today, it's Sodom and Gomorrah out there, so wicked. But one, it's not like Sodom and Gomorrah out there. Not really. I mean, when that happened, Sodom and Gomorrah, why was the city destroyed? For the sins of the action? It said the whole town, all the men, and that's usually a hyperbole. But whoever wasn't exactly trying to stop it. And it's not as if they were, there was another incident very similar to Sodom and Gomorrah that happened in Israel. Gibeah. Remember, is it Gibeah, the men of Gibeah, the Benjamites of Gibeah? Or is it? I think it was Gibeah. Anyways, I'm not going to go looking it up now. But there was a certain priest came through with his concubine, and she was raped and murdered, or left for dead, which is essentially the same thing, right? She did die, so that was murder. It's like, just because, like, I didn't mean to kill him, we all just raped her, That was just the accident. Oops. So it doesn't count as murder, does it? It doesn't really matter, because rape and murder pretty much similar penalties. Especially that case, obviously. So it was, and like that whole city got destroyed in the end, though not before God pointed out a similar thing I'm trying to point out now, which is yourselves can be hypocrites in such an urgent, like, we'll punish them. If you had been there You know what I mean? If a bunch of guys are raping a woman and you're part of the group, you say, well, I'm not going to participate. But are you going to stop anybody? Oh, I'd stop them. Maybe you would. Maybe you would. Maybe I would, right? Maybe I would step in and say, stop this. This is wrong. But maybe I'd say to myself, they won't stop. They'll just push me aside. So why say anything? I can't do anything about it. Or maybe they'll hurt me. What about my family? I've got a wife and kids at home. I don't want them to get hurt. Why should I get involved in this? I got to think of them. I got to protect them. There's a whole lot of reasons why you wouldn't step in. You might not step in. I'm just saying, until you've experienced a high-pressure situation where your life maybe is on the line, or do you have this intense peer pressure? Have you ever given in to peer pressure? Ever? If you've given in to peer pressure, then you could have been part of Sodom and Gomorrah. If you went along with the crowd just because you didn't want to buck the trend or whatever, or because you didn't want to stick out, or because maybe you didn't participate in something bad, but you didn't stick up for the right thing either. If ever you did that, then you could be capable of it. Don't kid yourself. Meaning under the right circumstances. And you know what? Like Peter denying the Lord. You never think you deny the Lord, and Peter never thought he'd deny the Lord. But then when he saw him getting arrested and taken away to be tried, and then people were asking him, and he thought, it might mean me getting arrested, and it came down to it. He was afraid, and he denied the Lord. You just did it. So that's an important lesson and worth bringing up again. The most important thing is don't become yourself a hypocrite. It's so easy to look at hypocrites and think, wow, what a bunch of, bad people. I'm sure glad I'm not like them. The truth is you are like them. And the more ways in which you can see you're like them, the better off you're going to be in overcoming your sinful nature. Like I said, everybody puts on a bit of a show. I don't expect, especially in church. I'm not saying you should go to the grocery store and say, hey, I got some problems. It'd be weird, right? That's business. You're not, but when you're in church or with your intimate friends, how you doing? Or if someone specifically asks you, like, how's your walk? Are you walking in righteousness? Nobody's going to ask you that. Nobody's going to ask you that. But if they did, you're going to tell them all your sins? You're going to tell them specifically? If you get blindsided, I don't blame you. I probably wouldn't. I know I haven't many times. Many times I was like, oh, everything's great. Walking great. Any struggles? Sure there's struggles. Some struggles, some, a few things here and there, little things, struggles, There's just, but otherwise pretty great. Hey, I was working on a song or a Bible study the other day, and I want to talk about that instead. Yeah. That's how people are. That's how I am. It's not easy to be open, to expose yourself to people, because, I know, it's especially, well, here's the thing. When people hate you, it's a little easier. Sometimes when it's your friends, though, it's hard because you're afraid of what might happen. It's hard to trust people. All right. So, and these things he said unto them, and the scribes and the Pharisees began to urge him vehemently. I looked that word up because I had to reschedule for 7:35, and it was 7:30, and I'm like, oh, I could have scheduled for 7:30 because we're ready to go. So I looked at vehemently, and it means terribly. Like they're really pressuring him, urge him terribly. Like, come on, like, what about this? What about that? To provoke him to speak of many things. Talk about the Romans. Talk about the law. Talk about they began to ask him all kinds of questions, laying wait for him and seeking to catch something out of his mouth that they might accuse him. So basically, he dines with the Pharisees and finds himself in a trap. I don't think the guy who invited him intended this as a trap. It's just that sometimes people who disagree strongly, you bring them together and there's inevitable conflict. He comes in and he's not going to do what they want him to do. He's going to do what he wants to do. And they're not going to do what he wants them to do. They're going to be who they are. They're going to want him to wash his hands and be a proper Jew in their minds. They're going to want him to be pretty much a Pharisee because the Pharisees have been doing a good job. And if he was the Messiah, he would acknowledge that. And in fact, he would follow our customs because they're the right customs. The idea that the Messiah would come and hang out with fishermen and tax collectors and preach to harlots is unacceptable. And we don't believe it. And so from the beginning, they're disinclined to believe in him because of his lack of fawning attention to their sect. And they're also because of his accusations of them, or the things he says, which basically, I'll say, make them guilty. I had a better word for it, but I couldn't grab it. Basically, make them guilty. I don't want to say accuse. I mean, like it condemns them. This teaches condemnation of them. That's the word I want. Condemnation. Cause them to further be alienated from him, his preaching, and so on and so forth. So as he's saying these things, they're becoming angry, and they really start to urge him. Go on, answer us. Tell us about these things. Tell us about what I can only think of the questions they normally have. Should we pay taxes? They want to find him to say, and then what they do is that, like the tax issue. And when they ask him about that, is it lawful to give tribute to Caesar? They were trying to put him in a double bind, where he could either, they could accuse him to the Romans, like he said we shouldn't pay taxes. He's urging people to not pay their taxes, which could get him in trouble with the Romans. Or as in the cartoon, the pilot says, so, in other words, he shares your opinion, because they didn't really want to pay taxes either. But they never would say so. See, that's the hypocrisy, is they didn't want to pay taxes to the Romans either, but they wanted to get him to say what they believed, and they'd accuse him of it, which is pretty dirty. And then, of course, and if he said they should pay taxes, he'd become unpopular with the people, or so they thought. But he found a way to get away with saying pay your taxes in a way that the people were not offended, because he basically put it on a different standing and said, hey, whose name is on the coin? And then give to Caesar what is Caesar, and to God's what is God's. And plus, the Caesar what is Caesar is they were the government. Jesus respected that. There's no sign in anything that he disrespected the authority of the government of his time. Not that if they did, not that the evil of their doings, any particular evil. The conquest and all that. The view of the Lord and a lot of the conquest in the Old Testament is just sort of like, this is just what happens. But it's like, it's in the peacetime how things are ruled that often get judged. And the Romans, for the most part, let the Jews do what they let them have their own customs and required them to pay taxes. The difficulties were from the Jews just wanting to throw off the rule of the Romans and have their own king. That's a lot of the problem with Jesus is that some people, they didn't want to accept the Messiah who wouldn't do that for them. And also others who are afraid that if he did start talking like that, the Romans would come down and slaughter them all like they eventually did in 70 AD, and scatter them again in the diaspora as they did in 70 AD, and which lasted, over 1,000 years, almost 2,000 years. And it's still really ongoing. They haven't all been gathered back together to Israel, nor do they want to be. I mean, many Jews don't want to live in Israel. They want to accuse him either to the Romans or to the people or whatever, to be able to find fault. Even if it's kind of a trick. Even if it's something they themselves, like they can get him to say a truth that is offensive to the Romans or to the people that they themselves agree with. If they can get him to do that, they'll do that. They want him to be careless with his words, so they begin to urge him to speak on a bunch of different topics in the hope that he'll slip up somewhere. Chapter 12. In the meantime, when there were gathered together an innumerable multitude of people, insomuch as they trode one upon another, he began to say unto his disciples first of all. So in the meantime, I wonder about that. What does that mean? Like, I assume he's eating at the Pharisees, or this meal maybe it was short-lived. I don't know. How did he get out of there? They don't describe it, In the meantime, it seems like the wrong introduction there. I'm not going to look it up in the Greek. I'm just saying it just sounds like a little wrong. Like, in the meantime, does it mean a little later? I don't know. Maybe in the meantime is appropriate. I don't know. So whatever. I'm not. I'm just saying it's like I don't get that in the meantime. In the meantime, meanwhile, back at the Batcave, it's always like something happening at the same time. At least that's in what that means to me. Now maybe in the King James time it meant something else. Now I got to look it up. What does that word mean in Greek? I should see, because there you go. Oops, don't cross the streams, Paul. Oh, wrong button. Wrong button. Okay. And I don't know if it's actually wrong to cross the streams. It's just a joke I make all the time because of, why, probably. It's a joke, and I grew up in the 80s. All right, so, what's wrong with my thing? Okay, there we go. I'm going to show you right now. Click, 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 browse internet, transition, there we go. I really did that. It's actually the next chapter, silly boy. I want chapter 12. Oh, that is 12. Okay. In the meantime. Okay. So, yeah, this is not a good translation because it doesn't even make sense. Meanwhile, back at the Batcave. In the meantime, at Commissioner Gordon's office, usually REL. I don't know what the abbreviation REL. Relative, relational. Don't know. Usually REL. Thanks. Usually REL. Wow. I'm not going to assume I know what that means, because I just remember my original teacher talking about primitive roots. No. He used to talk about prime. It's a prime root, like a prime cut of prime rib, right? No, there's no such thing as prime roots. The PRIM in Strong's Dictionary is a. Now in Greek there is primary words right here, right? But in Hebrew there's no prime root. It's primitive root. At least that's what it stands for in Strong's. Including feminine and blah, primary word from the article, the relative. Relatively, and somewhat demonstrative pronoun who, which, what, that. That's not helpful at all. What is in? In is N. In what? Okay, well, whatever. The meantime is definitely wrong, okay? So there we go. I'm satisfied. Because that seems like odd. In the meantime, meanwhile, Jesus was at another place doing something else. So that's the value of being able to look things up, isn't it? To be able to be like, well, it doesn't mean that. Even if I get no particular meaning, it's in what, when they were gathered together. Okay, so some other. I would almost prefer if we just start with, there were gathered together an innumerable multitude of people. Insomuch as that they trode one upon another, he began to say to his disciples, first of all, beware ye of the leaven of the Pharisees, which is hypocrisy. For there is nothing covered that shall not be revealed, neither hid that shall not be known. Therefore, whatsoever ye should have spoken in darkness shall be heard in light, and that which ye have spoken in the ear, in closets shall be proclaimed. In the ear, it's supposed to be and in closets. I don't know why it's just in closet. Whatever. Spoken in the ear, in closets. Maybe I just always thought there was an and there. Shall be proclaimed upon the housetops. I probably just read the and there. Even though it's not there, I still want it. It's grammatically correct. It's just it flows a little better in English with another and there. But he probably means in the ear and closets, meaning in a real secret location. You went into a closet. And then you whispered, this is the secret. You know, they whispered in what's been, not only whispered, but whispered in closets. Shall be proclaimed upon the housetop. Oh, yes. Okay. So, first of all, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees, which is hypocrisy. In another place, he talks with his disciples, and he talks about beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees, and they're confused about what he means. And here he identifies it as hypocrisy, but there he identifies it as their doctrine. And the two, of course, are intertwined, because the doctrine is what often causes hypocrisy. You know, because unless you have a doctrine that really guards against hypocrisy, that is meant to remedy the problems of hypocrisy. And we talked about hypocrisy, right? Acting under a mask, putting on a false front, right? Whatever doctrine you have, humans are going to naturally have a motivation, generally speaking, whatever doctrine. I mean, like you have some moral doctrine like thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery. Or even if whatever doctrines you have, even if they are internal things like thou shalt not lust after a woman with your eyes, right? You're going to have people covering it up and putting on a face that says like, no, I never do that. I'd never do that. And, you know, but how do you remedy such things? You know, it's like, well, one, you got to emphasize that the internal battle is the most important part. And it's, you know, the external is the easy part. And people talk about the commandments of God are not grievous. Yeah, that's why they're done away. They're not good enough. That's how I try to explain to people. When I talk about the law of the Old Testament being done away with, they're like, well, we can do anything now? No, now you can't do anything. The law allowed all kinds of things because there were all kinds of loopholes. You know what I mean? You could get a divorce just for any reason because it just said give her a writing of divorcement if you want a divorce. There wasn't any stipulated reason you had to get the divorce. You know what I mean? And they asked about reasons, and they said, well, the law lets you do it for any reason. So, like, if I just want to marry another woman, I could just because maybe she's prettier than my wife, I could just do it. Well, the law won't stop you. It's a loophole. It says thou shalt not commit adultery, but since you're allowed to get a divorce, you can get a divorce for any reason you want. So you can get a divorce before you commit adultery, and then it's not adultery. And, of course, that's nonsense. In any real, it's just it's the technicality. It's totally avoiding the spirit of the thing. The spirit of the thing is calling us for faithfulness. It's the internal world. And the internal world is most important. And you have to emphasize the internal over the external for people to avoid hypocrisy, because they have to consider their internal world to be the most important. Like I said, it's all right. You know, I don't expect people to go around constantly proclaiming their faults. But if you're not at least self-aware enough to know you have them and what they are, you know what I mean? You don't necessarily, it's good to make confession. We don't have to do it constantly, because it's like sin is something that is a battle that, yes, people often engage in on a daily basis. They may fall short to some particular thing that plagues them all the time, or they may just from time to time, or that something may blindside them. Sin is going to be coming after you, and you have to fight that battle. And until you reach perfection, you're not going to be able to, you're going to lose some of those battles. And the goal is perfection, and we ought not sin at all. We know this. We have to remember that we ought not sin at all, and even the sins inside count. In fact, they're the most important, because when we least expect it, like I said, when the peer pressure is right or the situation comes about, all of a sudden, you know, it's easy not to commit adultery when you're never presented with opportunities for adultery, right? But if you're constantly leering at women and then the right circumstances appear, you know what I mean? When you're suddenly being tempted to adultery or being pressured to adultery, you know, and yet you were all faithful all that time, but you were never tempted, ever. You know what I mean? And I don't mean like you were tempted, but you didn't find it tempting. I mean, it's like sometimes you get tempted where someone tries to tempt you, but you're not tempted in yourself because, and that's the ultimate, where it's like you're tested, but internally there's not even a little bit of yielding. Like you don't even want to do it. You know what I mean? Some things become like that. When you overcome certain sins, you come to the point where you're like, you wouldn't even want to commit adultery. It wouldn't even be an attractive prospect. You know, a lot of things have to do with a lot of sins and stuff is the knowledge of righteousness and of the good things of God can supplant all of that. You can say, why would I give up all my righteousness for this? I mean, this isn't worth exchanging that. It's not that good. You know what I mean? I'm not some like teenager who just who you know had his first nocturnal emission and can't hardly control himself. You know what I mean? I'm not saying teenagers can't control themselves. I know they can. I've seen the proof. But you know, we can all learn to control ourselves in one way or the other, and that's part of the battle. And it starts inside. You don't start trying to convince everyone around you that you're righteous. That's pointless. It's whenever someone's doing that, it's almost manifestly you should be skeptical and realize, and because I've seen it over and over where guys who were sort of like, I'm all righteous, right? And that's not being qualified in any way. You know, I mean, we can qualify it. I'm righteous with the righteousness of Christ. The blood of Christ is on me. You know what I mean? In that sense, yes, I have righteousness. But in the sense of like every one of my actions in life being the right action, no, not perfect yet. I aspire to be so, right? But whenever someone starts saying like, oh yeah, you know, I never sin, and I mean that. I stopped sinning. I haven't sinned in 5 years, and I never sin. And it's like whenever I find someone who's on, or maybe not saying it that explicitly, because I've only encountered a few people, and they were online, so I don't know what to think of that, how real it even is. But the few people I've known who have hinted at absolute righteousness would then do wrong to their brothers and stuff in minor ways. But they get angry when anyone suggested there was anything wrong about their doings because they had to protect this righteous reputation they had just spoken into existence. You know what I mean? They're just proclaiming themselves righteous, proclaiming themselves without sin, and not merely in the sense that Christ makes us without sin by cleansing us from our sins through his blood. You know what I mean? I can say I'm without sin in the sense that Christ has cleansed me and cleanses me. His blood cleanses me to salvation. I mean, it's like, because if it didn't cleanse me all the way to salvation, then there'd be some sin along the way that could cause me to lose my salvation if I indeed possess it. You know, people always talk, well, what about, can people lose their salvation? It's like, well, it's not because, it's like what it is they seem to, like Luke 8:18, wasn't it Luke 8:18? I want to look it up briefly. Luke 8:18, they seem to have it, right? All right, I just want to do this so you can see what I'm doing, because I know it's kind of like me doing it off screen. This isn't particularly exciting, but at least it's not as boring as watching me do it off screen. Look, 8:18. I used to memorize this verse, and now I got it memorized again, which I'm glad. Yeah, take heed therefore how you hear. For whosoever hath, to him shall be given, and whosoever hath not, from him shall be taken even that which he seemeth to have. That's the essence of how losing your salvation works. Salvation cannot be lost because it makes no sense. It makes no sense. If you lose it, then it isn't because what is salvation? It's God saves you from death, from hell. And I don't like that we're about to encounter that word, and I'm going to show you something interesting. In fact, but salvation is from the ultimate fate. Let's put it, the ultimate ill fate of man, the ultimate, punishment. That's what salvation is. Salvation from what sin brings ultimately. Yep. Well, I don't think I'll need this actually. See what I did here? Well, I will actually. See, the word hell is used in Luke 3 times. And we're at one of them. But I was going to show you, when we get to it in the next verse, how different those are. Or two are different from the other. It's not the same word each time. Okay. Oh, what am I doing? Okay, yeah. Okay. And so, and the thing is about hypocrisy, because everything is going to be revealed sometime. It's eventually God is going to reveal everything. Everything is going to be exposed in the judgment. We're talking about the impossibility of losing your salvation because of the nature of what salvation means. It means you're saved from ultimate destruction. You don't get saved from ultimate destruction, then get ultimately destroyed. And if people don't like my language, like let's say you believe in eternal torment, when I say ultimate destruction, I mean that's what the Bible says. I'm just using the same Bible. Even if I say the second death, just because I'm choosing to say that, you choose to characterize the second death as torment forever and ever, which is fine, but I'm using the language that it calls it. It's the second death. It is ultimate destruction. Right? So, whatever. It's like we can dicker about the details, but I'm going to use the language I prefer. I don't like you might not like to say hell. I just said it. Yeah, I mean, that's how it's usurp. I love it sometimes. It's great. I mean, if God spared not the when I sing it in my songs, I say hell. I used to say Gehenna and Hades. Sometimes I do, but sometimes I like hell because it's a lot more powerful for a song. If God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell. It's like you sing hell with like that. It's powerful. To hell. To hell with them. It's very powerful. Your ears perk up when you hear that because of all the mythology surrounding it. So it makes good song material, but it's not so clear when you're trying to teach someone the Bible, especially when we have multiple words translated hell. And hell is just the name of one of the Norse gods of the underworld. Hell, with one L. But that's where it comes from. Some Nordic god. Cast them, just like Hades is, what's the name of the Greek god of the underworld? Oh, Hades, yeah. Here I am. I'm hell. Come on down. I mean. So there's a major disconnect between some of these passages and what the word we use indicates. Now, we use it for the word that Jesus used, right? So it's our own word used for that. But the problem is a lot of the mythology is bound up with it. And also, it's one thing when he uses Hades or hell or Sheol, because those all refer to what we would call the underworld. The Old Testament word Sheol is the word often translated hell in the Old Testament. The word Hades is often translated hell in the New Testament. But there's a third word. There's actually a couple others too. There's like Tartarus, but especially there's Gehenna. And there are Old Testament passages that refer to the valley of the son of Hinnom as the place of burning. Also, is another name of it is Tophet. Tophet is ordained of old. For the king it is prepared. The pile there is fire and much wood. The breath of the Lord of hosts, like a stream of brimstone, doth kindle it. I believe that's Isaiah 31. I don't know if the words are right. Tophet, look it up in a Strong's Concordance. Tophet. And it is at the same place. We haven't even read about it yet, but he's going to mention it right here. He's going to say that it has power to cast into hell. So I'm way ahead of myself. Only because I'm saying it's about salvation, hypocrisy. We want to mind the inner man. Mind the secret things. There's no closet into which you can go where we can hide from God. Ultimately, God is our judge, not men. We ought to fear God and not man. That's why I'm saying all this about hell. It's going to tie in nicely when we get to it in a moment, right? Because we've been laying groundwork, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Everything that we try to hide about ourselves, everything we try to conceal from other people, God knows all about it. He even knows things about ourselves that we hide from ourselves. Sometimes our own hypocrisy, we're blind to it. That's bad. Deaf to your own lies, blind to your own hypocrisy. Can you imagine? No, you can't, because you wouldn't know. You may already be experiencing it. Deaf to your own lies, blind to your own hypocrisy. That's something that occupies my prayer. How am I offending you that I don't understand? And I'm sure and the thing is, as soon as I even say that, I have inklings. But I've been at this for a while, so it's like I kind of know. I don't really know, but I know it exists. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know everything. Meaning, there are things I do know about myself that I know need to change. There are other things about myself, and I've talked about them in these studies. I'm not going to get into a big self-examination right now, but I have in just this week, I think, or last week, I was talking about various things, right? I know I still need to change things about myself. But I also know that there are things about myself which probably need to change that I don't know need to change yet. And it's probably good not to have it all at once, because there's only so much the human spirit can take. It can be rather crushing to be constantly confronting with your own faults. People who have sought out perfection have found the burden often too much. And it's only something we can even hope to attempt with God's help, and also understanding God's mercy. You gotta have a healthy understanding of the mercy of God and His grace towards you, that it is to help you and to see you succeed, and to not get down on yourself. In spite of you may discover you're a hypocrite, in spite of the fact you may discover you've got hidden iniquity in your life. You're like, I've been doing this for so long, and I realize this is the wrong thing. This is what I always do in this situation. However, am I going to change? I'm so used to being this way. I feel like it's such a part of me that it's like I'm going to be a different person when this is over, and that's true. The only way the sinner that I am, that is my nature, the sinner that I am by nature, the only way, I often say is like, couldn't God just make us to the end, just make us to the perfect state? I assume He could. You know what I mean? But how could I be the same without He would have to implant memories of this. And if He implanted memories, why not just make it real? And maybe, you know what I'm saying? Can I be who I will be without doing these things? You know what I mean? It's like or believing I did them. You know what I mean? Like, on some level, it's like, why what you'd want is God to make an illusion of whatever it is that He's building in us, so that we would just be it at the end without having to go. That's just lazy. That's just like saying, I want God to do everything, and I don't want to experience anything. I don't want to go through anything. I don't want to be made into anything the long way, I guess you would call it. So I just accept the way God is doing things because I don't have a choice, and it is, and I trust God's judgment. A lot of people don't. They think, well, things ought to be different, and this is how it ought to be, and if it was, then it'd be easier to believe in God because He would think like me, essentially. He would share my opinion on everything. And I'm so smart and clever that I figured out, like how things ought to be, because I know everything. Because the only way you could really know how things ought to be is if you knew everything, or you could kind of, of course we can judge some things, right? I hear people judge God, and they think they're so smart. And they really have no idea. They don't understand God's goodness. They don't understand God's love. They don't understand because they look at all the evil in the world and they throw their hands up and say, there's no way. No way there's a loving God. No way there's a good God. Look at all the things that happen. Look at all that happens to us. In the animal world even, you know. Animals suffer and die. People suffer and die. Cruelly. These are all words we make up. You know, is it all cruel? That's a dangerous word, right? I say that and then like, what will be expected of me? I don't know. I don't particularly like to think about it. But whatever, you know. Trust that when in time that the temptation that comes, God will make us able to bear it. So we can't hide from the judgment of God. Things done in secret, hypocrisy in secret is no secret to God. Everything's going to come to light. Ultimately, their teaching is hypocrisy, and the way they teach leads to hypocrisy. A lot of what churches do, I will say this also creates a lot of hypocrisy in a lot of churches. A lot of churches are very unhealthy social environments. I've been to a few churches. You know what I mean? And they are unhealthy social environments for people who do not, you know what I mean? For people who want to be real. No, oh no, we got to play hypocrite in this church. I'm sorry. It's the first church of hypocrisy. Didn't you see the sign outside? I missed it. Yeah. This is the first church of hypocrisy, so if you don't want to be a hypocrite, if you want to be open about what you are or have a real relationship with people, you should try some other place. You know, in here we just listen to sermons and sing songs and we pretend to be holy. You know. Verse 4. And I say unto you, my friends, be not afraid of them that kill the body, and after that have no more that they can do. But I forewarn you, whom ye shall fear him which after he hath killed hath power to cast into hell. Yea, I say unto you, fear him. So, again, here we have hell. Now, let's look at the word hell real quick since I teased it the whole time. Hold on, you know. We're going to mute for a second. I just got over a cold, and then I just caught a cold. So, this seems to be a very mild one, though. The last one was really bad. All right, so, not that bad. I mean, right? It wasn't that awful, was it? I thought it was pretty annoying for me, but okay. Cast into hell. Hell. It's Hades, right? Wrong. It's not Hades. It's not Gina, as you can see, though it looks like that in that, you know, whatever there. Phonetic spelling, always useful. Gehenna. Gehenna. I would say Gehenna, or whatever. Well, in fact, I think that's a problem. Or maybe that's the Greek spelling. Gehenna. But in Hebrew, they separate the ge from the henna. It's Gehinnom. The valley of the ge means like the valley, I believe. Gehinnom, the valley of Hinnom. And they compound it into one word, and they call it Gehenna. Notice they, you know, Gehenna, valley west and south of Jerusalem, also a symbolic name for the final place of the punishment of the ungodly. Very good definition there from the helps word there. Now, when they say it's a place underneath the earth, a place of the one I disagree with here is a place underneath the earth. It never locates Gehenna under the earth. Like, you can look, and I haven't done the on the right-hand side here, you can look up every single occurrence of Gehenna in the New Testament. Menos in Luke, I had pulled up these other scriptures. Right? Luke 10:25, and thou, Capernaum, which art exalted into heaven, shall be thrust down to hell. If you look up that, it's going to be Hades. I think we did. And in Luke 16, when we talk about the parable of Lazarus and the rich man, it's Hades. Now, Hades is equivalent to the Hebrew Sheol. The reason that is because passages that quote from the Old Testament where the word is Sheol, they use Hades. Jesus uses Gehenna in a somewhat unique way. Not entirely unique, because like I said, the prophet Isaiah, well, the prophet Isaiah uses another name for the same place. And that's hard, you know, you have to know that Tophet is the same name of Hinnom, and you'd have to use like, how did I figure that out? Was it the Bible dictionary or a atlas or something like that? I forgot what the first research I did on that was, but it was a fact that I never forgot. Tophet and Hinnom are the same place. Is Hinnom actually in the Old Testament, or is it usually Hinnom? And we will find, Hinnom, right? Let's do Hinnom. We'll go with the Old Testament. This is just, I like this better. Nope, the Hinnom, did I spell it right? I can't even see that. Hinnom. Oh, I did. Yeah, see, there's the valley of the son of Hinnom. Joshua. The border, it's talking about geographical thing. The son of Hinnom. The valley of the son of Hinnom. The valley of Hinnom. As Joshua is mentioned a few times in Joshua. Here we go. You don't need, look at 2 Kings 23:10. And he defiled Topheth, which is Tophet. Sometimes the H is off, which is in the valley of the children of Hinnom, that no man might make his son or daughter to pass through the fire unto Moloch. It's actually the place where they sacrifice children to Moloch in fire. They use fire sacrifice to child sacrifice to Moloch in the valley of Hinnom in a place called Tophet. It's a pretty touchy thing that Jesus uses Tophet, Hinnom, as his analogy of hell. Moreover, he burned incense in the valley of the son of Hinnom, speaking of one of the bad kings, and burned his children in the fire after the abominations of the heathen. You can't see this. Oh, boy, what a dummy. Oh. Let me just... I thought you guys could see that, so let's go back here. Here are all my references. This is like moving the window around, just shoving it in there. There we go. Here we go. So here we're in Joshua. We see the references to geography of where Hinnom is. Joshua, Hinnom. 2 Kings 23. He defiled Topheth, which is in the valley of the children of Hinnom. And moreover, he burned incense in the valley of the son of Hinnom and burnt his children in the fire after the abominations of the heathen, whom the Lord had cast out before the children of Israel. And he caused his children to pass through the fire in the valley of the son of Hinnom. Also he observed times and used enchantments, used witchcraft, death, and dealt with familiar spirits, or with a familiar spirit, and with wizards, which wrought much evil in the sight of the Lord to provoke him to anger. Noah, Adullam, and again, wizards, people say, Harry Potter's evil. Harry Potter's a fantasy book. It's not the same thing. Same thing as Star Wars, space wizard, fantasy is not the same thing. Except that they teach evil. So, well, they do teach evil to cast magical spells. It's like, if spells work like that, we'd all be casting them. I mean, as far as if magic worked like that, it would be a part of God's plan. That's not how. That's not what wizards in the days of whatever king we're talking about here in Kings did. Wizards were just the priests of competing gods, and who used enchantments and stuff to do things like, let's slay your. I will give you power to kill your enemies, and to, I will cure you of your STD with the. We will just sacrifice some children here, and that's the kind of wizards we're talking about. Not children's fantasy books. Very different kind. They call it wizard, but I mean, I don't know. It's like I said, hell is a Greek god. When Jesus said cast down to hell, does he mean cast down to the Greek god? No. So when he says wizard, does he mean Harry Potter? I don't think so. Not that I'm making an endorsement of that. I'm just saying, like, some people get so up in arms about just, it says witch. Wah! It's like, it says some Hebrew word that we translated witch, etc., etc. Now, whatever. And there's another geographical reference. But it's, now here again, they have built the high place, Jeremiah, they have built the high place of Tophet, which is in the valley of the son of Hinnom. There's a valley and they have a high place there called Tophet. They shall no more call it Tophet nor the valley of Hinnom, but they shall call it the valley of slaughter, for they shall bury in Tophet till there be no place. And go forth to the valley of the son of Hinnom, which is in the son of the... So what I'm saying is, this place Hinnom has a lot of history and stuff associated with it. It's not the same thing as Hades and Sheol. In fact, the valley of the son of Hinnom is never equated with Sheol, the Hebrew word which is translated into Greek as Hades. It's never equated with Hinnom in the Old Testament. Hinnom was a very specific location with a pagan altar and a place where they burned children in fire, where they buried the dead after some horrible battle and slaughter. And it was in the time of Jesus the place of garbage, where they would burn garbage and throw the dead animal carcasses. At least that's what I was told. In the time of Jesus, that there was perpetual fires there because it was basically the garbage heap of Jerusalem. It was it wasn't the place where you're going to build a house. It had a lot of bad history. It was like they burnt the children there. It was defiled with the blood of many thousands of corpses. It was extremely defiled land, so that was never used for anything except for defiled purposes. I don't know if they've ever excavated there to find. I mean, they probably have. I don't know. I've never looked at it. I've never looked into it. So, but Tophet is Hinnom. You don't have to go to a Bible dictionary. You just need your Bible. All right. Wait, and then and here's the path. I just want to give you the Tophet. Also has a few references here. See, the one thing I like about my search, it takes the H in too. In fact, you just look Toph and you get a lot of good references. Isaiah, I wasn't 31, it was Isaiah 30. No verse. Isaiah 30. Tophet is ordained of old, yea, for the king it is prepared. He hath made it deep and large. The pile thereof is fire and much wood. The breath of the Lord of hosts, like a stream of brimstone, doth kindle it. This is the seminal verse about Tophet and Hinnom, as far as I'm concerned, in the Old Testament. The one that really, this is what Jesus is drawing on. When he talks about Hinnom, I challenge you to tell me what else is he drawing on. Maybe the battle. He's not really trying to say whatever. It's a place of great history. It's a place, but that's the verse where where God is like saying, I'm taking over Tophet. And it shall be a place of burning, where we burn the wicked. That's what Tophet is about. You burnt the innocents. You burnt the bodies. You know what I mean? But that is where God is going to burn the wicked. And the message of Jesus, I'm still in the wrong, there we go. It may seem like a subtle difference, but it's all the difference in the world. The place of Tophet is the place or Gehenna, which is Gehinnom, the valley of the son of Hinnom. In fact, when I do my Sermon on the Mount song, when I say cast into hell, to hellfire, I lately I started singing it, like I don't think I have it recorded, cast to the fire of the vale of Hinnom. Because that's what he's talking about. That's what he said. He says, it's better for you to enter into life with one eye than to have two eyes, to be cast into the fire of Gehenna, of the fire of the vale of the son of Hinnom, into Tophet, the place of burning, the place where God's breath has kindled the fire. And notice in the context here, I'll give the alternative point of view, because I always do, or I try to, right? But be not afraid of them that kill the body. The body is one thing. Your body is killed. Afterwards, they can't do anything. Your body, you're dead. You're dead. Your body's dead. There's no more they can do. But I forewarn you whom you shall fear. Fear him which after he hath killed, and the subject is the body, hath power to cast into hell. We pass this over a lot there. But we know from Scripture, what comes after death? The resurrection. And I saw the dead, small and great, stand before God. And the sea gave up the dead which were in it. And death and hell delivered up the dead which were in them. Death and hell delivered up the dead. And death and hell were cast in the lake of fire. The lake of fire is Tophet. Or at least Tophet is a symbolic reference to what is referred to as the lake of fire. I don't know that they are literally the place, you know what I mean? But Tophet is a place that symbolizes the ultimate fate of the wicked. As it said in that good definition, a place of punishment for evil. Originally, the name of the valley near Jerusalem of Tophet, or the valley of Hinnom, with well, obviously there's a valley with a raised high place in the midst of it, Tophet. That's where the judgment's going to take place, as far as symbolically. So Tophet, I don't know that God's going to sit in Tophet necessarily, but you imagine if God's throne is in Jerusalem, Tophet is just outside. And it jives perfectly with Isaiah chapter 66. For as the new heavens and the new earth, which I shall make, shall remain before me, so shall your seed and your name remain. And it shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, from one Sabbath to another, shall all flesh come to worship before me, saith the Lord. Referring to the new heavens and the new earth, which I shall make. Everyone shall come and worship me. And they shall go forth and look upon the carcasses of the men that have transgressed against me, for their worm shall not die, neither shall the fire be quenched. And they shall be an abhorring to all flesh. Now, some people say that's some sort of analogy of eternal torture. I don't see it. I see their argument. I see how they would say it. It's like, well, look at, after killing, there's something more that can be done. It's not just killed. You can be tortured forever. What I'm saying is like, after your body is killed, God still has power to raise you from death, and you can be made to live again. And men can only do that. They do not have power over God. They are not ultimately your judges. And look at the point he was making about hypocrisy. And what the essence of hypocrisy is the fear of men. Because it's all about what men think. There's no other reason for hypocrisy. Why else would you put a mask on? It's for what other people see. It's all about putting on a show in front of people. And what he's saying is the people you're putting on a show for are not to be feared. People do hypocrisy because they are afraid of men and what men might do. And what he's saying is, be afraid of God, because he's the only one who can truly destroy you. And however you want to characterize the destruction doesn't matter, because it is Gehinnom. It is not Hades. It is Gehinnom. Because death and hell in the New Testament, chapter 20, when it says death and hell are cast in the lake of fire, Revelation chapter 20, it is death and Hades are cast into the lake of fire. This is the second death. There is a second death, which they have no authority over, but which God has authority over. Because when he brings back to life for judgment, he also has power to cast into Gehinnom, which is, or the lake of fire, which is, the lake of fire is Gehinnom, is Tophet. They are, that is I can't think of any other way to tie those things together. Because the lake of fire cannot be Hades, because Hades is thrown into the lake of fire. Hades is something else. Hades is, because here's the thing. When people kill you, that is their power to cast you into hell. They do have power to send you to hell. When someone kills you, they send you to hell. They do. When Jesus died, what does it say in the book of Acts? That his soul was not left in hell. It says his soul was not left in hell. Because hell refers to the traditional idea, like Hades, Sheol. Hell is the underworld and the human idea of what happens after you die. Now, what the reality is of it, humans don't know. But it refers to the first death. After the first death, you automatically go to hell. Whatever it is. You go to Hades. The heathen all go to Hades. Everyone in the book of Luke. Later on, when we get to the parable of Lazarus and the rich man, we see a man who is in Hades. And what does he find in Hades? He's in view of people who are also in Hades. That's, you know what I mean? Oh no, they're not in Hades. They're in Abraham's bosom. But where are they? Paradise. Paradise is. There's interesting interplay, because on one hand, people believe in eternal torment and say, well, we can't have that. Like, we can't have that right. I mean, because you understand, in Isaiah 66, it says they're going to go out and look at the men who transgress against God and against those who for whom the worm does not die and the fire is not quenched, they're going to go out and look at the people with the worms and the fire that's not quenched, right? And that's a picture of death, if ever there was one. Undying worms is not an undying soul. It means they eat, and the worms never stop eating you. It doesn't mean, you know what I mean? Like the flame, like if I want to torture you, the way I do it is I'll get like where's my, I wanted to grab my this is, just because this is a good one. It's like, okay, we're going to do a little torture. I'm going to apply this to you for 4 or 5 seconds, maybe 10 seconds. It's not going to kill you, but it's going to burn you badly. It's going to hurt. That's torture. But I have to stop burning you. If I were to take, outside I got like a big pile of sticks, right? Big pile of sticks. Let's say I decided and said, I'm going to cut down all the trees on my property. In fact, I'm going to cut down all the trees in Illinois, all the trees in the world, and I'm going to pile them into one big pile. One big pile. And I'm going to go even further. I'm going to collect all the trees in the known universe. In fact, all the trees, I'm going to collect an infinite number of trees and build a fire out of it. A fire built out of an infinite number of trees so that the fire never goes out. If I throw you into that fire, what's exactly going to happen? Are you going to be tormented? Not for long. Anyways. So, and I know it's a touchy subject and a lot of people disagree. It's okay to disagree. I like to make my point strongly. I hope it doesn't offend those who disagree. It may offend. And do I hope it doesn't offend? It's like, well, I would hope you do. Whatever. Sorry. I just think it is things that should be reconsidered. You know, I have a book a friend sent that talks about the 3 views of hell, and that there have been, from the earliest time, different views of hell, and they were tolerated. People in the majority have a tendency to not want to tolerate people of slightly different views. And I think that is unfortunate for them, because it poisons you. You know, you won't listen to people simply because you think you know. It's like, why do you know? Have you studied? Have you put in the time? Most people who believe in hell haven't put in the time studying it that I did. They didn't put in the time. They probably wouldn't know anything about Gehenna, Tophet, and really, you know about all that stuff. Good for you. You know, I mean, you studied it all. You reconciled all the verses. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can deal with verses that disagree with me, and not just the ones I used to support my position. I can talk about the passages that. We're going to do Lazarus and the rich man. And I'm not going to walk in there and be like, how do I blow through this? We'll take our time. We will understand. God has power to bring about the second death. And that's what I say. And he's the one we ought to fear. That's why hypocrisy is foolishness. Because God is our judge. When we trust the Lord, and we know we have salvation, we can not be afraid of what men will do. The worst they can do is kill us and send us to the first hell. I mean, to Hades. There is no first and second hell. They're 2 totally different things. Hades, men can send you to Hades because it's what happens when you die. Jesus' soul was not left in Hades. It's just the old understanding of what happened when people died. When people died, they went to Hades. You know? I don't, and as far as in that regard, there's not a lot of afterlife type stuff. Afterlife, I think, is a misnomer. There's no such thing. You're either alive or you're not. You know what I mean? Like if I die and it's like, there's my body, but I'm still alive, then I haven't died. You know what I mean? And what Jesus doesn't say here is what is in the rest of the scripture, though, that you must be raised from the dead, which is what I believe. You must be raised from the dead to be judged. And the sea gave a look at Revelation 20. There's the dead are delivered up. To me, that is such an important passage. You know, I had the traditional view when I was young, and it's just the reason I changed my mind is because trying to reconcile all the scriptures, and also the fact that I wasn't tied to a denomination. The reason you will never get a square story you'll have difficulty getting a square story about this from pastors, and they will mostly equivocate. They will not. You know, I mean, they will say, well, it's complicated, and I know, and blah, it's hard, and blah, blah, blah. They have invested their career, you know, it's like they've invested their career in one particular point of view. And just up and changing is not really on the table. They have every motivation not to, and also just it. I'm not going to say something so crass as financial, but the point is, like, the position they have that allows them authority, to tell people what's true. If they go to a different point of view, they immediately lose it, and so them changing their mind becomes totally ineffectual. And so it's not entirely their fault, but they're in a difficult position. I mean, I used to be very hard on pastors and stuff, and I still can be, I suppose, right? But I try to be understanding. But not being tied to a denomination or to a job that involved me having to have a particular point of view enabled me to study things a little differently. And then the people who have other motivating factors, what I would say is, like, you are too invested in your point of view to be a proper judge. You can't judge these things because you are invested in your point of view. When someone's invested in a particular point of view, like invested, like their life, their career, their reputation, their friends, it's like it takes a tremendous person to overcome that. And so, pardon me if I'm a little skeptical as to whether or not, because when I'll have a discussion, I'm like, they're not honestly considering even. And that's not saying that convicting everyone, but it's like very often it's the case. So, anyways, that's well over time. Sorry we were late. Hopefully, Monday. We won't. Hopefully, we won't have the same problems next time. I'm not gonna get into detail. No point in that. Anyways, thanks for joining me. We will pick this up on Monday, and we'll be back here then.
Ye fools and blind, for whether is greater the gift or the altar that sanctifieth the gift. Whoso therefore shall swear by the altar sweareth by it, and by all things thereon. And whoso shall swear by the temple sweareth